Hello my dear friends and welcome back to another video. So with the Book of Boba Fett only 2 weeks away now and with not much in the news lately, I thought it might be a good idea to do a bit of speculation. So in today's video I'm going to be exploring why the Bad Batch are pretty likely to appear in the Book of Boba Fett, either in Season 1 or Season 2. Now just to get the obvious out the way, yes I know there's a very good chance the Bad Batch are not even alive by this point in the timeline, but this video is based on the assumption that they very well could be. Now yesterday we got a teaser trailer called Ready and we heard Fennec Shand talk about how there is a war brewing and Boba replies they will be ready. Now even though we don't know exactly who their adversaries are going to be in the series, they could be crime syndicates or gangsters of some sort, one thing is for sure, that the show is going to be all about the underworld of the galaxy and exploring Boba Fett's past, present and future. And one aspect of Boba's past, which Jon Favreau teased the show is going to do justice to, is the fact that he's a clone. As Star Wars fans, we all anticipate that the series is going to deal with Boba's adult life and where he's been since the original trilogy. But we cannot forget, my dear friends, the impact being an orphaned clone has had on his sense of identity ever since the Battle of Geonosis. So you might be wondering, how does this connect to the Bad Batch? Well, to put it simply, if this series is going to explore Boba's past, I think it would be very fitting to include surviving clones in the show, even if they're not clones that Boba's met yet. That being said, the Bad Batch Season 2 could introduce Boba to Clone Force 99, and by the time of the Book of Boba Fett, he does know them. In any case, a nod to the Clone Wars era and what took place on Kamino in the Book of Boba would not only be poetic, but a nice way to connect the series. But the bigger reason that I think the Bad Batch appearing makes a lot of sense all these years later is that Boba needs allies, and since he is functioning in the underworld of the galaxy, if the Bad Batch are still alive, they might not be as out of reach as you might assume. The Cid missions that we endured in Season 1 of the Bad Batch proved that in the wake of the Empire, in order to survive, the Bad Batch had to make connections with the Trandoshan, who herself might appear in the Book of Boba Fett and is well known in the underbelly of the galaxy. Now, if they're still around all these years later, they might be very old, kind of like Captain Rex, but will be very well experienced in taking commissions for jobs of all sizes. They might not have the skills that they used to, but that does not mean they can't get the job done. After all, even Captain Rex fought during the Battle of Endor as an old man with a white beard, but he still kicked ass. Boba and Fennec have Gamorrean bodyguards, but they need more men. They need fighters behind them, and they might seek out the help of someone who can connect them. This could be Cid, or someone who could refer Boba and Fennec to a group who might be willing to help them, and it's at this point that Boba could come face to face with the enhanced clones. Now, I've already made a video about all of the surviving clones who are still around at this point in the timeline, and in there I spoke about the possibility of the Bad Batch, and as I say, given their accelerated aging or dying of some other event, there is always the possibility that they die long before the Book of Boba Fett, and this might be what future seasons of the Bad Batch show us, so they might never even come into live action, but I very much doubt that, especially Omega. Omega does not have accelerated aging, and given the fact that she is technically Boba Fett's sister, I think they're definitely going to make a connection between the two, and they will meet at some stage. And speaking of Omega, I've spoken about her multiple times in the past, and while I do think she will come into live action eventually, I very much doubt it's going to be in the first season of the Book of Boba Fett. They might want to continue her story in animation first, before exploring her middle age and beyond in live action, kind of like what they did with Ahsoka, who started out in the Clone Wars and then Rebels, and then eventually made her way into live action in the Mandalorian Season 2. So there is definitely more story to tell in animation first, and if you think there's no way the Bad Batch could appear without Omega, who is to say that she remained with the Batch all this time? Maybe she became a mercenary or bounty hunter in her own right, or maybe even a Mandalorian. Now, another connection that we simply cannot ignore is Fennec Shand, who's appeared in both shows, and I don't think this is coincidental. I believe this was done deliberately by Dave Filoni as a connecting point between the two series. The connection she made with Omega might be important in the Book of Boba Fett, and what's interesting is we don't know if Fennec Shand told Boba that there is another Fett out there. that is something I would love to see on screen, and I can't help but feel that is something Dave Filoni and Robert Rodriguez are going to shoehorn in to the Book of Boba Fett. It's unclear at this stage whether the Book of Boba Fett is going to be a limited series or not, and just as Tamora Morrison says, it all depends on the success of the first season. And I think that's going to be the key if we do see the Bad Batch in the show or not. Maybe there are all of these ideas they're preparing for a second season, but they're only going to explore it if season 1 does well, which I think they know it will. And timing wise, it looks as though the Bad Batch season 2 is going to come out after the Book of Boba Fett as the next series in early 2022. Now, the Bad Batch season 2 takes place many years before the Book of Boba, so in many ways with connections to Omega and Fennec Shand, it could act as a prequel right after the Book of Boba Fett ends. And with that said, for all we know, Boba has already had encounters with them off screen, although this is probably unlikely, because if he's going to meet them, they might use the Bad Batch season 2 to give them some backstory if they will appear later on in live action. Now, as I say, there is a chance they are not alive after Return of the Jedi, but we like to think that they are. And if we're honest, it's kind of foolish of Disney and Lucasfilm if they're just going to keep these characters to the animated shows. They're clearly very popular, and even if it's just Omega, she does have a bright future outside of the Bad Batch. Look how massive the finale was, setting up connections to the Mandalorian and Palpatine's contingency plan. They wouldn't have done that unless it was to connect it to the Mandalorian universe, and a major part of that is going to be the Book of Boba Fett. Now, with previous speculation of animated characters possibly coming into live action, I've always explored other shows they could appear in. For example, when we talked about Hera Syndulla, we spoke about the possibility of Rangers of the New Republic or Star Wars Ahsoka, but there is also the chance of the Andor series. We can't say the same for the Bad Batch, maybe Omega, but generally speaking, the Book of Boba Fett is the most likely show. The fact that in the recent Empire magazine Jon Favreau stated that Boba Fett being a clone is still a major part of his identity after all these years, I feel like they're teasing some connection to the Clone Wars and maybe even the Bad Batch. And then of course we have to consider 28 years after the Clone Wars, which is when the Book of Boba Fett takes place, if all of the members of the Bad Batch are still alive, or just 1 or 2. And even then, if they still call themselves Clone Force 99, or have created a new movement altogether. Crosshair in particular seems the most likely to eventually start his own syndicate or gang, and imagine if he's still alive all these years later, if he goes up against Boba Fett. It might sound a bit far-fetched, but when you consider all of the connections between the two shows and the characters within them, it seems to make more and more sense. So let me know your thoughts of all of this in the comments down below. Do you think we might see the Bad Batch in the Book of Boba Fett, or do you think they're going to remain in animation? A few of you guys have been telling me that you miss speaking about the Bad Batch, and that's partially one of the reasons I brought it up today. I miss it too. I can't wait to do full episode breakdowns of all of the upcoming series. It's always a blast. So if you enjoyed this one, guys, please be sure to give me a big fat thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're brand new, and a massive welcome if you are. But otherwise, I'll see you in the next one. I'm Star Wars Meg. May the Force be with you always.